Welcome to The Atypical View. I'm your host, Lauren Florio, a licensed marriage and family therapist specializing in autism, ADHD, and broader neurodiversity. As a fellow neurodivergent mind, I'm here to help us learn and spread awareness on all things mental health, as well as help us unlearn harmful stereotypes by providing psychoeducation rooted in research and lived experience rooted in my atypical view. The Atypical View is obviously this podcast, but it's also my private practice where I provide therapy to clients here in California with me and provide neurodiverse coaching to others worldwide. So, without further ado, let's jump into the Atypical View. Hello. Welcome to another episode. Today's episode is important because I know a lot of people struggle with the spectrum of autism. I know autistic people that don't even know about autism levels 1, 2, and 3. And so I thought today's podcast would be especially helpful to be able to define not only what these levels are, but where they originated from and what they mean. Let's jump into our first segment today, which is our psychoeducation portion of today's episode. Let's start with the history of autism. In the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, there have been 5 books that have been revised over time. So we're currently at the DSM-5, but the original DSM, I believe, was in the early 1950s. And so we're going to identify how autism has changed over time and how we've gotten to the levels that we have today. So what we know now as autism was first introduced in the DSM as childhood schizophrenia. It's an outdated belief that autism was like this early form of psychosis caused by an emotional disturbance. And about 30 years later, in the 3rd edition of the DSM, we introduced something called infantile autism. This was under pervasive developmental disorders. And it recognized autism as this distinct neurodevelopmental disorder with early onset and social communication and behavioral differences. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and we do see these symptoms as a part of it still today. And in 2000, the 4th edition of the DSM was revised to categorize autism as a spectrum. This was the first edition to do so. The manual grouped autism-related conditions under a broader category, still using that pervasive developmental disorder, which is called PDD. At the time, that was considered the autism spectrum. So there were 5 conditions under PDD in the DSM-4. There was autistic disorder, which is still a diagnosis, and it's what most people refer to as classic autism. So most of what we see in autism today was relevant in that 2000 in the DSM-4. Then we had Asperger's disorder / Asperger's syndrome. This is no longer a diagnosis, but you may still people say they have Asperger's because up until I believe it was 2012, people were still getting diagnosed with this. So some people resonate with the term. It's similar, and it's pretty much very close to what we might see as autism level 1. So it's similar in the social and behavioral features as autism without it having this like very intense clinical significant delays in language or cognitive development. So it's what is level 1 is a little different from that now, but essentially it's a lot of people who had Asperger's at the time now correlate to level 1 autism. The 3rd one under this category was pervasive developmental disorder. So this is also no longer a diagnosis. It was really like a catch-all category for people who had like some features of autism, but were sort of sub-threshold with their symptoms. The 4th one was childhood disintegrative disorder, CDD, which is also no longer a diagnosis. This was a rare condition where a child develops normally for the first 2 years and then experiences like a dramatic loss of previously acquired skills, language skills, motor skills, social skills. And this is what we kind of identify as regression, which is still part of the autistic criteria and can happen for a lot of people. Regression is relatively common where we see normal development and then a sudden kind of drop in not even just like a pause in development, but sometimes literally going backwards. Then finally, the last disorder in this category was disorder, which is still a diagnosis, but it's not a part of autism now. So it's considered a genetic neurodevelopmental disorder. So primarily this affects girls, and it involves normal early growth followed by a loss of hand coordination. And it comes with this reduction of head growth and severe cognitive impairment. And again, this is a genetic disorder that is not related to autism now, but at this time it was considered a part of the autism spectrum. So finally, it was actually 2013. I think I said 2012 earlier, but in 2013 was the DSM-5 release. And this is where autism was reorganized. The DSM eliminated all of these separate labels like Asperger's and such and introduced 3 levels of autism based on support needs. So we have level 1, which correlates to needing support. Level 1, individuals of this level have difficulty initiating social interactions. They might have unusual or unsuccessful responses to social advances made by others. They may seem to have decreased interest in social interactions as well. On the repetitive behavior side, it may interfere with daily functioning to a degree. These individuals may have some rigidity and struggle redirecting from interests that are fixed. And in level 1, we see a decent amount of independence to the point where if you didn't know this person's autistic and you didn't know much about autism, you probably wouldn't be able to spot it. So this is also too with level 1, we tend to see higher expression of masking, which you haven't seen my video on masking and you want to learn more about it, I have a previous podcast all about masking. Level 2 is requiring substantial support. So autistic individuals with this level have a pretty marked level of severity. They may have a very limited interest or ability to initiate social interactions. So rather than just kind of struggling to transition from particular interests, it may be really hard to engage with someone with these limited interests in general. Like they may be very fixated on revolving their lives around a limited interest. And so the ability to initiate social interactions, which obviously affects their ability to initiate social interactions and may have difficulty forming social relationships with others, even with support in place because of how restricted their interests might be. These special interests are very obvious, and maybe like their repetitive behavior or rigid routine is really obvious. Even a casual person may be able to see that there's interference in this person's functioning in a variety of contexts, and that this person might need more support to really engage in the world around them. But they may still have elements of their life where they can be independent. So finally, level 3 is requiring very substantial support. This level of severity causes individuals with autism very severe impairment in their daily functioning. They may need around-the-clock caretaking, or they may just never reach certain levels of independence. Doesn't necessarily mean that they will never be able to have a job or never be able to live on their own or have a relationship. That's not a requirement, but it's a possibility. Someone would need a pretty substantial amount of support at this point. We may see a very limited response to social cues or nonverbal cues. We even may see a limited verbal communication ability, so leaning towards that nonverbal side of things or low to no verbal. Their fixed rituals and interests are very, very rigid. So their special interests and their rituals greatly interfere with their daily functioning, and it makes it difficult to cope with change. So it's very difficult to redirect this person from a fixed interest or change their routine in some capacity. We're going to see a lot more meltdowns, and the idea of masking is going to be low to none on this side of the scale. So what is really, really important is that these levels are not about stronger or weaker autism. They are about how much help somebody needs in everyday life. And this correlates with what symptoms they show and the severity of those symptoms. However, severity of symptoms is not always consistent day to day with every autistic person. And the more masking we see, the harder it may be to actually identify how much they're struggling with these symptoms. So let's talk about what it means to have support needs shift. The level of support needed tends to have a large variability through the spectrum of autism. So a handful of things can impact how we perceive levels, including masking, like I mentioned. Support needs are influenced by stress and sensory overload, unmet needs. This makes the clinical approach to things of boxing someone into one level or the other kind of challenging. So many individuals may appear relatively independent until they're pushed into high stress, new environments, An autistic person may function just fine at home in their routine while they struggle deeply in a new restaurant or a noisy restaurant. An autistic person may watch a movie at home just fine and tolerate it well, whereas going to a crowded movie theater with a bigger screen and louder audio may be intolerable. An autistic person's daily routine may go smoothly one day and cause a meltdown the next because of an unmet need, like a poor night's sleep. Or maybe they ate less the previous day, or maybe a preferred caregiver just wasn't around. So, because of this, someone's level is not fixed in the clinical perspective we want it to be. It can absolutely vary and shift over time depending on stress and environment and self care. So, when you see that someone's diagnostic label is 1, 2, or 3, it's based off of the perception of the assessor at that time. And it's giving us a more general sense of that person's abilities and need for support. Another important thing to know is that the level of autism is also not just a one-size-fits-all for the entire diagnosis. There's 2 core domains that we assess for autism. One is the social communication side of things, and one is the restricted behavior side of things. So every autism diagnosis is based on those 2 core spaces. So that's social communication and interaction, maintaining conversation, reading social cues, understanding other people's perspectives, intentions, and, managing that kind of communication. And the restricted and repetitive interests, the special interests, sensory issues, that's the other side of things. The need for rigid routines, very specific special interests, stimming and repetitive movements, struggling with change, sensory sensitivities, that's all the other side of the domain. So technically, someone could be a level 1 in one category and a level 2 in the other. So because they're rated separately, someone might need more support in socializing and managing social communication than in coping with routines, or vice versa. This means that someone may have different levels for each criteria, such as, a level 2 in social communication and a level 1 in restricted and repetitive behaviors. These 3 levels of autism provide a framework to think about how we can support that person, not value them or have capacity. That's why, as I've said before, I really hate the language of high-functioning autism versus low-functioning autism, because it's not about them being a cog in society and how much they can contribute to the world. It's how much support that they might need. And so this can help people in their lives support them in the areas that they need the most support in and give them independence in the areas that they can thrive in. This being said, this is why autism doesn't look the same in everybody, and why some people who are very high masking may come across as not autistic in your eyes because you who is a level 3 nonverbal and needs that around the clock care. The research that we have does not show a difference in the autistic person's brain. So the autism is not stronger or weaker or bigger or larger. It either is or it isn't. That's also why I hate the commentary of maybe we're all just a little autistic. No, your brain is either autistic or it is not. And the symptoms that come from that and how you manage them is how we see these different expressions out in the world. Even someone who has very hyper-fixed special interest and routine may be good at making friends and connecting with people. It can't just be this all or nothing thing that we decide people either are or aren't good at. And understanding this can help us provide less judgment. Looking at this framework can help us better understand why someone who is primarily independent and takes care of themselves may have a meltdown and may still hurt themselves in that way and may not all of a sudden meet the expectation that we have for them. We see a lot of, especially level 1 autistic individuals as neurotypical or autistic. And it's unfair because they are struggling with the same things that other autistic individuals that may be more obviously autistic to you are struggling with, but it's a little more internal and they're better at performing for you. So this can allow us to be more forgiving and more understanding as we start to see more and more people feel comfortable disclosing their autism, whether that be level 1 to level 3, and also understand level 1 and some level 2 autistic individuals are going to be the individuals who are more likely to be talking about autism, like me, online, because we have the voice and the independence to do so. Many level 3 autistic individuals are either nonverbal or have their social media and their voice monitored by a caregiver in some way. That's not to argue the ethics behind that, but that's to understand that you're seeing a lot more level 1 individuals talking about being autistic now because, one, our research has developed in the last 5 to 10 years, especially for women and people of color. Two, we have really created a movement about autism awareness, education, and acceptance in the last couple of years where people are feeling more comfortable to come out and say, yes, I am autistic, and yes, I am different, and yes, I do mask, and I do struggle. So with that being said, I think it's a good time to transition into our second segment, which is the atypical view. And this is the portion of today's podcast where I share my view, my atypical view, based on today's topic. I am an individual who falls into the category of level 1 on one side and level 2 in another. While I definitely still have deficits in social communication, for the most part, I can do okay. I have friends. I understand neurotypical people better now than when I was younger, but I can at least start to better understand what their expectations are for me. And that's part of even why I can mask, is because I know what to present as. I know what they're looking for. Now, that's not to say that I'll fool everyone. I can still be very socially awkward. I can still say the wrong thing. I could read the wrong perception or intention from somebody. But in the grand scheme of autism, I am level 1 because for the most part, I don't really need support in socializing. I can make friends. I am a therapist. I don't think I would be a good therapist if I was working with neurotypical people. I definitely do struggle with change, but I can present as if I'm not struggling as much. I can mask that a little bit better. I've just learned to manage that in a way where I can be as prepared as I can be and prep myself. In my younger years, I used alcohol to cope for a lot of my own rigidity. So inherently in college, I could be super go with the flow because we were drunk a lot. And so I didn't have to handle my dysregulation because I was using an unhealthy coping skill. This is not me recommending that. This is the opposite of that. I still ruined my nervous system by ignoring my needs. And obviously, alcohol can be incredibly harmful. But I think that I probably appeared a lot more go with the flow because I was under the influence. Ever since I kind of gave that up and had to manage my emotions and learn new coping skills, change is hard. Sensory issues have gotten harder. Really like routine. I get really dysregulated if I have to leave my house without proper notice. My mental plan shift, and it's incredibly dysregulating to the point where sometimes I won't go to the store and get the thing that I need, which is part of where we see something like causing harm. I might not go pick up meds that I very much so need because I didn't plan ahead for it and I didn't realize that I had run out or whatever. As you can imagine, that may interfere with my daily functioning if I'm going without meds or I'm going without food or going without something because I didn't plan for it appropriately and now I'm out and I'm distressed that I have to leave to go get something. I would argue that this level for me, like I'm on the low side of a level 2 for this. And so the restricted interest, like I really struggle with having to do something that I don't want to do. I made a career out of my special interest. I love psychology. I love the mind. I love neurodiversity, and being able to dive into that and talk to people and help people is part of what I love so much. I hate going to sports events, but you know what? I've stopped saying yes to some of these things and I've started kind of realizing what I like and what I want and why I feel so distressed in these settings. It's super loud. It's very overwhelming. There's horns all the time. I don't know what's happening. You could tell me, oh, they're going to swing and this is going to happen in this inning. And like, cool. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't care to know what you're talking about. I think people have explained baseball to me probably 50 times. Every time I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure it out, and then I'm going to like it once I figure it out. Guess what? I've never actually liked it. I've pretended to for the sake of the people that I'm around and that I love and who they like it, but I don't like it. I don't like last minute hangouts with friends. I don't like really last minute anything. I want ample time to plan. And that's just something that's how I support myself. And that's how people in my life support me too. I need that. And they can honor giving me advance notice for things and planning hangouts a couple weeks in advance, a week in advance, whatever. And it helps me. As for support at home, my partner can go and pick up medications for me because that's how he can support me. I don't think I would be outwardly as independent if it weren't for the help of my partner. And obviously I do things for him too, but they're things that I can be better at and that I'm stronger at. Anyway, I think I'll pause there for now. We're going to move into our call to action segment, which is our final segment today. My hope in spreading this education is not something that should be applied for the sake of limiting someone, but instead to provide a useful lens on if you are yourself trying to better understand a recent autism diagnosis or exploring getting assessed. The reality is that both better understanding masking and support needs, referring to these levels, can help us diversify how we see autism. We have different levels in the DSM for all sorts of things that we accept. Bipolar disorder is an example. We have bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, which signifies the severity of how this disorder affects somebody. Autism levels 1, 2, and 3 are no different. It allows us to understand the severity of the symptoms, the amount of support that person might need, help us better understand the spectrum of autism and how that person falls on it. When we can expand our narrow view of autism, we can allow so much more acceptance for autistic individuals and support them in different ways when we can finally understand people a little bit better. If someone discloses that they're autistic, trust them, believe them, ask how you can support them, ask what challenges they face in connecting with you, and see how you can show up, see how you can be supportive. If you have the capacity to do that, it can make a huge change. Some really small things can make a big difference. And the more that we can understand the spectrum of autism, the more acceptance we can have for autistic people globally, the more people will be able to access support, the more people who will be able to actually get diagnosed. If you have autism at any level, your brain is no different than any other autistic person. You deserve support, whether you're a pro masker and have been hyper independent your whole life, you still deserve support. You can accommodate yourself, accommodating your sensory needs, buying clothing that feels less disruptive, buying earplugs, noise canceling headphones. You can accommodate yourself by leaning into your special interests and honoring your special interests. I encourage you to ask yourself, what is one accommodation I could implement today that, even just as an experiment, in the hopes to accommodating myself better? You deserve accommodations. You do not have to suffer just because you've learned to. Thanks for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it, subscribe, leave a comment or a review, or send it to someone who might benefit from the psychoeducation, or just need a little reminder that they are not alone. If you are interested in my coaching or therapy services, you can reach out to me directly and connect with me at theatypicalview.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and I hope we can stay connected.